You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I am Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are back from our 2 weeks off, although if you've been listening to the show, you've known that despite taking 2 weeks off of recording the news episodes, we did actually have a bunch of content that you guys could enjoy over the past 2 weeks, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Just as a quick note, we are going to be taking a short 1 week break in February. That's the only one we have planned for the immediate future, but we will have 2 episodes coming out for different topics. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover in a similar style to the topics that we covered over the past 2 weeks during the holidays, be sure to send your topic ideas to thestreamingwars@gmail.com, and we'll take those in consideration. If we don't get any suggestions, we do have some ourselves that we've got planned, but none of them are super time sensitive, so it's definitely things that we can shift around. So if you have a topic, be sure to email it in. All right, so with that being said, there was 2 weeks, and as suspected prior to us going on this 2-week vacation, we told you that there probably wasn't going to be that much news. And we were, in fact, correct, because there is some stuff that came up here or there, but there is not a ton to actually discuss. So we're going to jump into the different things that have come out. Most of them were actually coming from before Christmas in the short amount of time that we had before, from the time we recorded our last episode to present. There was a lot of the stuff that happened between the last episode and Christmas, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. So first up, we're going to talk about some big business changes, some mergers, and some potential buyouts, and some partnerships that are coming that have been announced over the past 2 weeks. So the first one, on December 19th, it was announced that TiVo is going to be merging with the entertainment tech firm Xperi, and this is a $3 billion deal. Now, while this isn't specifically related to the streaming services, the reason we're bringing this up is specifically because it seems as if, well, at least based off of the information in the article that we have in the show notes from Variety, it sounds like TiVo over the last couple of years has been straying away from the hardware side of the business and trying to go more towards software. When you put that into the terms of streaming services, you're looking at a very similar avenue from Roku, where Roku has their hardware, their little sticks that you can plug in, but the more focus and where they make a lot of their money on is actually the software-based service, which is the Roku interface that allows you to preload different channels that you subscribe to and interact with the different services at the same time. TiVo, it's entirely possible, could switch from being a DVR service, as it's best known for, to something like this based off of this new merger with this new company. They've been focusing more heavily on software over the last couple of years, and it does make sense for them to potentially do something like we've seen Roku succeed so well in, because there is a market for something like that, especially without the extra devices. So if this Xperia, which already has deals in place with a lot of entertainment's electronic manufacturers, they already have deals in place with Samsung Electronics, which represents 38% of its total revenue for 2018, and they have other licensees including LG, Microsoft, Panasonic, and Sony. So it's entirely possible that they could put together, and this is just a hypothesis or a theory. This is not, we don't have any actual concrete information on this. This is just us guessing, but we would assume that part of this deal could be TiVo switching over to potentially a deal where you see a TiVo loaded television, not so much about the DVR, but in fact more about that interface, and including the interface preloaded onto it like we see with Roku coming preloaded on certain televisions. That could be something that could be down the line, and that's something that would affect streaming services, and that's why we're bringing it up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This company, Xperi, seems like they just make all their business off of, licensing deals, and so they are just leveraging this technology for other things. And I think TiVo, I used to use TiVo. My dad still uses TiVo. And I think an appeal of TiVo, yes, was that it's the original DVR. Not the original DVR, but it kind of made DVRs cool. Just the user experience and the way that it handled a lot of things was kind of revolutionary at the time. And what separates TiVo apart I think is the user experience and how easy it is to search and use things. And when you're going about, for a live TV, setup, some interfaces are not that good. And I think TiVo, that's where it shines, is the user experience, is how easy it is to get and search for content for, classic TV. And I think that's where it's going to be leveraged. So I could see it being bundled with hey, here's the TiVo experience, but it's going to be on Roku. It's going to be like the software foundation for all these other players to build on. And I think that's where TiVo is really headed towards next. So instead of from DVRs, it's the next evolution of the company from, hardware set up top boxes. Wow, that's hardware to say, to more of the experience, to the service level. And that is where TiVo is going to go. And so I'm a little interested to see that. I don't think TiVo is necessarily that necessary for, like a Disney Plus or a Netflix type of thing, although you could obviously do that. I wonder if, these like a Sling TV or, a Fubo or Hulu TV or YouTube TV, if they're to partner with this new TiVo setup and have those channels, whatever, go through this TiVo interface, because that would be cool. And that would help me buy it, that product of hey, we're gonna have this simplified user experience that actually works for all these different things. I think that could be helpful, because if you use some of these streaming platform TV things, it's annoying. YouTube TV user experiences, I find it annoying to deal with. Hulu TV is a little bit annoying too, but TiVo, it is consistent. It's just simple and easy to use. I feel like that could be a really good leveraging point for these companies.
Agreed. And I think it's definitely a move towards the future. While DVRs are obviously still very popular, a lot of DVRs now are moving towards the cloud DVR system, and it's entirely possible that TiVo could be integrated to do something like that, even within, already built into a television, just using internet-based streams and things like that. So, all right, next one. This is a real quick one. The PlayStation Vue, as we know, is shutting down at the end of the month, is no longer accepting new subscribers. But it was a question of where would those subscribers end up? And it turns out it seems like Google paid money to Sony in order to have everyone be told, hey, go over to YouTube TV, because as it turns out, the service has been directing people over to Google's YouTube TV since they are closing down. They're actually directing people. So while it's not really that big of news, it shows that Google was looking towards the 500,000 subscribers that PlayStation Vue has to add to their ranks, and they paid for the ability to get that into the current subscriber base's minds. Another quick news piece, Disney has locked up exclusive distribution deal with a French pay TV giant called Canal Plus. Leveraging a 20-year output relationship, Disney and Canal Plus have set an exclusive deal that will see Canal Plus distributing Disney Plus when the service launches in France in March. Now, this is something that's they've already had a long distribution deal, which has encompassed a lot of the Marvel and Lucasfilm and Pixar films. They will also be the exclusive distributor of Disney channels in France, which means, let's put this in perspective. So if you were a cable provider like Comcast and you were in France, locking up this deal allows you to only allow the Disney channels to appear on Comcast as a service provider. Now, France is not nearly the size of the US, and there's obviously nowhere near as many different competitors based off of regions and things like that, but it does lock that stuff into a good place where if you were a company who wanted to have Disney on your service, that's not going to happen unless you, of course, are Canal Plus. So just a quick mention of that. Also, it seems like this is one of the first deals we've heard about a distributor being in charge of the distribution process of Disney Plus. I'm not exactly sure how that works, considering the service is internet-based, and I'm not sure how it would be unless they were adding as like a channel to like an on-demand channel package to the service, to the cable service that you have. I'm not exactly sure, but that's that. All right, next, there's a new service called VidGo, and this is a new over-the-top streaming service that will offer 60 channels for $39.99 per month. Surprisingly, however, is what they'll actually include. Now, there's been a lot of recent talk about a lot of the live TV services that are actually out and about, that are out there. Sling just actually raised their price. Hulu raised their price last month by, I believe it was $10. YouTube TV is staying steady at, I believe, $54.99. But Sling went up additional $10, and there was a couple of other ones that are fluctuating the number of channels that they have. Some of the channels that have actually been up for debate recently amongst a lot of the services are actually two different groups of channels, one of them being the ESPN and Disney channels. I believe Fubo TV had recently said that, well, Fubo TV recently lost the Fox channels, so Fox News, Fox Sports, and they already don't have ESPN Plus, and Fubo TV is known for their sports content. When without Fox Sports and without ESPN, when it comes to a channel that actually covers sports on a regular basis rather than just live sports as it happens. So they've been dealing with that. They've already said over time that they can't carry the ESPN and Disney channels specifically because the carriage fees are just too expensive for them. So it's one of those things where now they're in a predicament. But what's interesting is this brand new service, which is only offering 60 channels, comes in at a lower price than everyone else, includes ESPN, Disney, Freeform, all of the Disney channels, but it also includes the Fox channels too, Fox News, Fox Sports, and which is very, very interesting. So this could be a new player coming in right around this, of course, the same time that PlayStation Vue is going under. They could make a big splash because of their lower price point and the inclusion to channels that some of the bigger players like Fubo don't have currently available as part of their subscription package. Next up, Comcast will start selling smaller $10 TV packages to fight cord cutting in 2020. Now, the catch, of course, is that it looks like we don't have a lot of details on this. This is just something that's been announced, but the packages will cost between $10 and $20 each, allowing customers to build their own TV bundle. There will also be pre-made packages specifically for news and entertainment, and even a package to add local TV channels. This was reported over on Cord Cutter News, and there's no word on exactly when this is going to launch. It's just part of their new Comcast Choice packages that they're looking to sell in 2020. And what the catch, of course, is that while you will be paying $10 to $20 for these packages if you're only looking for certain channels, the catch, of course, is that you will still be paying equipment fees. So you'll still need to have a cable box, and that's, of course, where Comcast makes a lot of extra money off of their hardware rentals that you constantly are paying. So one thing to keep in mind when you're looking for something like this, if you already have internet, there are options out there that you can just get. Tony and I were talking about this before the episode started, and the reality of it is, while these packages could be cheaper, depending on how many channels you actually get for the $10, would it actually be reasonably priced compared to a streaming service that also only costs $10 a month, but you get a lot more content that you get to choose from? Building a custom package where you're only paying $10, and again, we don't have a lot of details, so I'm just going off of guesses and hypothesis of what it will actually include. But the reality of it is that, let's say, for example, you're able to get like 10 channels for $10. Out of those 10 channels, are you going to be watching the content all regularly enough to actually warrant the cost? When you pay $10, let's say, to some a service like Netflix, one, everything they have is on demand whenever you want it. Two, you're not regulated to only watching it whenever the channel is actually airing something. There's no talk about whether or not this would include a DVR. That would probably be an extra charge on top of the cable package, which means you're not going to be able to watch the stuff on demand. You're going to only be able to watch it as it airs. So while there's a lot of information that's not known about what they're exactly offering as part of these smaller packages, it's nice to see that they are trying to solve the problem of people leaving the services. I just have to warn people, maybe this is a little too good to be true. When you start looking at the finer print, it might not be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would love to have a little bit more information on what type of channels you would be packaging. I think that would help kind of our analysis of the situation. But even more so, I can see customers who are like, yes, they're going to kind of take like the streaming approach per se type thing of like, we're going to make our own TV, movie, whatever, our viewing experience. We're going to make our own, but with like Comcast, and you could play with the channels and whatnot. But it is very easy to be like, well, I want this bundle because it's got my one package and this one package and this one package. And at the end of the day, you'd be paying paying either the same or a little bit more if you just had it all bundled into like one big thing. And that's where, right, Comcast is going to get those customers. It's like, at the end of the day, it feels like you'd be having more choice and freedom, but they still kind of own you because you'd still be paying about the same amount of price. So, I mean, I can see where that is going to drive customers, but I do appreciate how Comcast is, even if it is for just a money-making move and playing on, people's psychology, I do appreciate how they're willing to change their business model, because we have seen AT&T a little bit change due to the times, and I haven't seen Comcast really do that besides offering Peacock as their streaming service. But their reaction to cord-cutting movement, to the streaming movement, if they are able to decouple certain channels from all being bundled together, right? If I just wanted to buy the sports package, or if I just wanted to buy Hallmark, Lifetime, whatever, if I could just buy smaller groups of packages, I think that could really, really help these cable companies, because it isn't just that people want to go to a streaming service because they just want to watch it on their phones or whatever. It's a lot of times they just want to go to something that's just easier and cheaper. There's still a good amount of people who watch Netflix and stuff like that on their TVs. It's not like they're watching it just on their smartphones and they're just super mobile and super whatever. It's like there's still a good amount of people whose their TVs are right next to their cable ports in their house. And I think if they do this right, I think it will allow customers to feel like, okay, like I can still keep my cable channels and it's still going to work out for me. I think if Comcast does it that way, I think it's going to be great for their business, because they're not going to lose a bunch of cable revenue, right? If customers see a big price tag on something and they're like, oh, I can't do that, then they're not going to do it. But if you give them something a little bit more like reasonable, then they'll reach for it. And at the end of the day, if you do kind of not necessarily bamboozle them, but if they still at the end of the day sign up for all these different channels, that's a win for you. But it's better to get something than nothing. And I think if these, cable companies want to survive, they have to adapt. And we clearly see that Charter is not wanting to adapt as they complain, as the CEO complains. But I think you got to adapt for the future. And I think the future is people want a little bit more choice. People want smaller bundles. People don't want 100 channels, because honestly, if you did like some basic statistics, it's like how many channels do people really watch? They don't watch all 100. I think the smaller packages done right will be helpful for the cable industry, and it can allow it to still stay afloat. Like people are like, oh yeah, cable's going to die. It's like, cable doesn't have to die. I think a lot of people like cable. It's just they don't like the baggage around cable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where cable gets a bad rap, and I think this is Comcast's way of trying to figure out a way to offer something that's a little bit different, something that could potentially get some decent press. Like I said before, I don't know. It's one of those things where it almost seems too good to be true, and normally stuff like that normally is. So, like I said, we'll have to wait and see exactly what it ends up being, because this isn't something that's launching immediately. These are just, at this point, information that Cord Cutters News has reported on because of their sources. So we'll see what happens, because this is definitely a story that's still developing. All right, so next up, also regarding Comcast, there was a report that came out from the Washington Journal right after Christmas stating that Comcast is preparing they're in advanced talks to buy Xumo TV. Now, you might not know what Xumo is, but it's an app that's readily available on mobile devices and many smart TV platforms, with the draw of offering free ad-supported video streaming. It puts together streams from other providers such as ABC News, The Today Show, or Wired, and its front end, so cord cutters can have their usual TV experience without paying a dime, because it's all ad-supported. So, the question, of course, is that, well, Comcast is about to launch Peacock, so why would they need to have this service? And there's two theories. One is my own, and one's from the Washington Journal. The first one from the Washington Journal suggests that they could be looking to buy Xumo specifically to provide technical and business support for Peacock going forward. But my question is, Peacock is supposed to be launching in April of 2020, and it seems a little bit late in the game to be bringing on a company that's going to be providing business and technical support with only basically 3 months advance before the service launches. It seems like a bad time to be bringing that in. However, my theory is that if they were to actually go ahead and buy Xumo, they could basically take the slots that Xumo has available on other platforms and substitute and just basically replace it with Peacock. Send out an update that is a new service which offers the same thing. We know that Peacock will have some ad-supported free will have certain aspects of it that will be free, and then they could just enhance it with the subscription-based options as well. So that's my thought process, because it does seem like that would be extremely feasible. It's just basically buying the space that the service already occupies. And sure, there's some back end stuff that would come out of this as well, but that's my guess. Zumo happens to be preloaded on a lot of different televisions that I was unaware of, some of which make perfect sense because there's a lot of things that just happened. But it turns out Zumo previously was backed by Panasonic, which is why Vizio and Panasonic were offering the service on so many of the televisions, and they're brands that are very well known, just like LG, which is also has Zumo on it as well. So there are lots of different televisions that already have it on there, and it seems like something that they could go that route. Other than that, I don't really see any real need for Comcast to be buying it. It just seems like if it was related to Peacock, it's a little too late in the plan to roll out Peacock to be bringing on another company that's somehow supposed to help that with only 3 months before it happens. You hear about, HBO talks about how they have Xandr, and they're going to be using Xandr in line with what they have. Disney obviously had BAMTech, and they had them years before Disney Plus launched. And these other companies, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be bringing in a company so close to the rollout if it had to do with it. Now, if it doesn't have to do with it, and it's just a matter of acquiring them for some other purpose, that's completely unknown at this time. And then speaking of Peacock, just a quick heads up. So I'm positive we mentioned this before the holidays, but it had been revealed that there's an investor meeting in January that is actually going to be happening on January 16th, where executives are going to be presenting the details about Peacock. And they're going to probably confirm a lot of the rumors that we've heard, which is it will be a free service that will have ad-supported elements to it, but then there will also be a upcharged version to get rid of those ads. But there's also word that it will have live TV options, where you'll be able to watch things immediately airing on certain networks like NBC or USA or NBC Sports or some of those other channels. We know the Olympics are supposed to be heavily promoted as part of Peacock, because Peacock will be the exclusive streaming service for the Olympics come this summer, as the Olympics are going to be taking place in Tokyo. There's a lot of things going on, but that is actually happening next Thursday, January 16th, where the details will be revealed. You can expect us to be talking all about the fallout of what happens at that announcement very shortly after that announcement comes. So expect that. All right, so just running through a couple of real quick things. The first one is Hulu has now added voice control options with Chromecast and Google Home, which means now you can ask Google to play things on Hulu. That was something that is obviously very prevalent with a lot of the other services out there, but Hulu was one of the long-lasting services that was not allowing voice control through Google, and now it is. There were some new Netflix subscriber and revenue numbers that were released. There's not a whole lot to talk about here, but it shows that the international user base is really, really where a lot of the growth is going to be. And that's not something it's something we've been talking about greatly here on the show, about how the international market is really the place for you to grow. And while a lot of the other streaming services that are launching here in the United States will slowly grow and maybe take a little bit of the piece of the pie that Netflix has as time progresses, the international market is really where the massive amount of growth is at. And Netflix acknowledges that, because as we've reported, a lot of the content-specific episodes over the past couple months, Netflix is really amping up the amount of international content they have coming from all over the world in various different markets. So these numbers just cement the fact that international growth is what's really important.
It's, once again, I'm going to keep saying it, it's going from third quarter reports and going from my own, predictions, which seem to be coming true. I'm just patting my back right now, just how great I was. But but seriously, it is what they have to do, and I'm glad that they're going to be able to just be a little more transparent about their numbers. I mean, let's be honest. I think the U.S., either you know about Netflix or you don't know about Netflix, but you've pretty much made your mind if you're going to get Netflix or not. I mean, yeah, if they come out with like a new Game of Thrones type show, I mean, I know people are like The Witcher is saying that, but that's a different discussion. But if it's like a massive show that's going to have lots of appeal that everyone's going to sign up for, but at this moment, they've they've kind of sitting in an equilibrium with, I think, the U.S. market. I don't think there's not that much they can do. I mean, there probably is, but not there. There's no like explosion for growth. You know what I mean? They're kind of hitting just a plateau. They have to do international, and I am interested to see the numbers. Outside, like Canada and the UK, in Australia. I want to know these numbers in Japan, Latin America, Africa. I want to see those numbers regions because that's where they have to go. People are like, yeah, it's the streaming wars, they're gonna die. It's like, no, they're honestly ahead, not only in the United States, but elsewhere in the rest of the world. I want to see those numbers. So it's good to see a little more transparency right now and in the future at the next earnings report of their breakdowns per region.
If Tony was looking to pat himself on the back just a little bit more, there was another report that came out on December 19th that says that Apple is looking to widen their streaming service offerings by going after two very different entities. First up with MGM, the movie studio, and they also have a television branch that creates shows for television. But they're looking at potentially making a deal with MGM to offer the MGM library, which is currently mixed up with a bunch of different providers. Normally it's based off of movie, but the most recent licensing agreement that I've seen is that there have been MGM movies that have actually appeared over on CBS All Access. So not to say that obviously couldn't change, it definitely could. But there's been some at least MGM stuff tied up over at CBS All Access, and now Viacom CBS is the parent company. But the other one is the Pac-12 conference, and this would make Apple a player in live sports, which we've talked about. And while Apple doesn't seem like the right place for, at least to me, for this to happen, it definitely seems like they're potentially looking at just different avenues of amping their service up, because while they've had some shows that have released and the shows have gotten, some groundwork, I know a lot of the different services or a lot of the different shows had nominations for a lot of the award seasons. None of them really jumped out to the critics, and there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about them when it comes to, within just the viewers themselves. So it's definitely something where Apple could be reevaluating the direction that they're going by thinking maybe outside of just having a few original TV series, maybe we need to come up with a way to bolster the amount of content that we have to offer people to bring in subscribers outside of the people that are getting the service for free based off of a new Apple purchase.
We probably ought to talk about what the Pac-12 is for either people who don't keep up with sports and the international people who might not know American sports. So the Pac-12 conference is, so people my age and other people in the world usually go to university. And the American, essentially, university system is split up in different regions. And there are a bunch of, college sports, university sports are very big here. And so one of the regions is the Pac-12. They are pretty much known for football, American football, basketball, softball, swimming, all those types of things. And so that's what we're talking about. And the biggest sport by far that makes a lot of money is American football. And you have two teams. You have a couple teams over there, but like USC is a big, flashy college that makes a lot of money, and they're pretty huge. And so that's what we're talking about is this conference. And these teams, these schools play different sports, and some make more money than the others. But at the end of the day, if they can get football, the rights for the football streaming, that'll be huge. And then basketball as well. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. And American sports make a lot of money, especially football. And so it's kind of a huge deal if they could be an important part of college streaming sports, is because there are a lot of people who watch them, and it can make a lot of money. There's your little education into the American sports.
Yes, and it's like you said, it's definitely something where it could change the direction of a service by just getting that. We've seen Amazon locking up rights all over the place. Premier League and then soccer league that's out of Germany, they're locking up rights. They're also already dealing with the contract that they have with the NFL, where they get Thursday Night Football in addition to, I believe, CBS. So it's one of those things where you can see that the other part of this is that's very important is when you look at the different companies, the companies that are going to be able to shell out a lot of money for these live streaming rights to the sports, whether it be college sports or whether it be NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA, the services out there that are going to be able to actually be able to get these rights are the ones that have the biggest pockets. So you're looking at Apple, you're looking at Amazon, and that's really the main two in my mind that have a ton of money, and they could just spend it to get the rights to this stuff. There's other services. There's obviously Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. I just don't see Disney footing over an insane amount of money right presently now. That's not to say that in the future they wouldn't necessarily go aggressively after some of those rights, but I think that currently that's not a position that the service that they have shows that it can be fruitful enough to go after some of these rights. Amazon and Apple, however, have money that they can spend like there's no tomorrow and lock up those rights for 5 years, and that could put them on the map as far as making them much more appealing to a different demographic than just the shows that they currently have. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. There was a very odd time that news article came out, because a lot of the news that comes out right before the holidays is just kind of, it's like out there, but then it just dies out and nobody talks about it, and it hasn't been brought up since. So there's no new development on it, but I wonder if I don't know exactly when the next Apple keynote is. I know it's at least a couple months away, I think. But if there is an Apple keynote, I would expect by the time the next keynote rolls around, I expect there to be some major announcements related to bolstering the amount of content that Apple TV Plus is offering, because it just doesn't seem viable to continue it the way it has been, especially with the lack of interest that it seems to be getting. And I'm not sure exactly that they want it to fail necessarily. So the last thing we're going to end on is actually, it's not really a news piece, but I'm going to strongly suggest you go check it out. So there was an interview that was posted on the Hollywood Reporter with the exec behind HBO Max, Bob Greenblatt, and it was a really, really good read. He's talking about a variety of different things. If you're unfamiliar who Bob Greenblatt is, he previously worked over at NBC, and he worked there for a long time, and then he left and he came over to Warner Media and was actually put in charge of HBO Max. He's also in charge of a variety of other aspects within Warner Media as well, but HBO Max is kind of the thing that he's over. He was part of the investor meeting where he presented a lot of the information for what HBO Max would be, and he specifically said there was one thing that was really, really important to talk about that came out of this, which was, he said that HBO is the signature of the platform, but the problem is that they've kind of hit a ceiling. Their audience, the audience demographic that they have has kind of been maxed out because they aim towards a higher demographic. And the only way to expand their reach is to not necessarily go after more of that same demographic, but to go after a wider demographic of different areas that aren't being addressed or focused on at the service right now. And that would be the younger generations, as well as a lot more that are driven towards the female audience. And he was saying that that's the goal with HBO Max, which we already knew. That's not a surprise there, but it was very enlightening to hear the person behind a new service talking about a ton of different things related to how does HBO compete against HBO Max for a project? How do you determine who gets the project, if it's HBO or HBO Max? There's a lot of really good information in this. The interview is linked in the show notes. I would strongly suggest, if you're interested in HBO Max, definitely check it out just so you can see, kind of get in the mind of somebody who's behind one of these services that isn't John Stankey, who doesn't do very well of connecting with the public, in my opinion. All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. We'll be back next week with some more news related to services. We have a couple of discussion points. Just as a hint, one of the ones we're going to be talking about this coming Friday, as you're listening to it, we'll be actually giving a quick review of season 1 of Mandalorian, so you be on the lookout for that. But then next week we actually have a discussion that I want to talk about, which is, there was an article that posted up over the break talking about how Witcher, the show Witcher, which was a show that just recently released a couple days before Christmas on Netflix, actually surpassed The Mandalorian as far as popularity as the biggest TV show in the world. I want to talk about that, but before we can talk about that, I want to review The Mandalorian, and I'll also talk about The Witcher season 1, because I've watched that as well. And then next week we're going to be talking about that as one of our discussion points, because I want to talk about how a little show on Netflix, no, it's not really a little show, but a show on Netflix got so big so quickly in the midst of The Mandalorian basically being the talk of the town for over a month. That's something you can look forward to next week. In addition to that, like I said, later this week we'll have a content episode catching up on all of the news that was released relating to the content over the past couple weeks. Outside of that, you can follow us on Twitter and join our Discord for all latest news and articles that we talk about here on the podcast, as well as some things that we don't talk about here on the podcast. You can follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes that are releasing for the podcast. You can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. This episode, wherever you're listening to it, is available on a wide variety of other services, including Pandora. It's also available over on YouTube as well, so be sure to check out that if you are looking for the show elsewhere. It is available as well as our site, thestreamingwars.io. It is available there as well. With all of that being said, I hope everybody enjoyed their holiday break. I hope you guys enjoyed the episodes we released over the holiday break. And with that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.